Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bottom bum bum bottom ba da 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 ba da
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. In this episode, we're dodging magpies and snacking on all the tummy seltzers we can find in our creator corner. Talking to writer, artist, colorist, letterer Tyler Crook about his new Dark Horse comic, The Lonesome Hunters.
Did you sense that giggle bubbling under Lisa's intro? We're not going to talk about why. We just came home from the Annapolis location of Third Eye Comics. We're having a great day. It's Saturday. It's a 4-day weekend. I am feeling pretty darn good, Lisa. How are you feeling? Clearly, you got the giggles.
I do have the giggles for a secret reason. We're making it sound salacious.
I mean, that doesn't bother me at all. I like to add a little mystery to every episode. If the listeners want to think it was for salacious reasons, then it was for salacious reasons.
But probably not. It's just that sometimes things get a little silly, that's all.
Yeah, like we said, we just got back from Third Eye Comics. We're getting very close to our San Diego Comic-Con trip. We're, 19 days away as of this recording? And when we get this close to the San Diego Comic-Con, that means we go to Third Eye because they have a rad selection of t-shirts and we have to stock up on new looks.
Brad has a thing where he's really picky about his t-shirt texture.
Correct.
So he has to go and finger all of the t-shirts. He doesn't have a lot of luck with buying t-shirts online that don't make him all squidgy.
Right. Every time I buy a shirt online that's not from a trusted vendor, I am disappointed.
Yeah.
But if you go to Third Eye, and like Third Eye, like all the shops around us have like a decent selection of t-shirts, but Third Eye has like a wall of comic shirts.
It's very reminiscent of like a Hot Topic situation, but it's all comic book and anime shirts.
Yes. And that being said, I was a little disappointed by the selection. I was looking for a little more variety in the shirts that I purchased, and I ended up just getting Marvel stuff. I actually got 2 Spider-Man shirts and an X-Men shirt. I love them, but I was really hoping to represent something new from DC and maybe get like a good Image comic shirt, and I had to walk away.
There is like a subtle poetry to which 4 shirts are going to be the 4 shirts that you wear at San Diego Comic-Con, because it's going to be in so many pictures.
Yes.
And you want your nerddom and your comic book love to be equally represented.
And I've added a new wrinkle this year to my looks. And that is, I've become infatuated with a pullover shirt.
Oh, yes.
Like a button-up shirt. And so the shirt has to be like a solid image that can be seen as with the pullover or with the button shirt open, right? Mm-hmm. And I have like a few geeky tiki shirts. I just got a new Star Wars one and a new Scooby-Doo one. So I'll be wearing those on top. So the t-shirt underneath has to be like
the party has to be a stripe right down the front.
Yes, not horizontal, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so I got to put away like some of my horizontal shirts. They're just not going to work this year. But like that vertical man thing shirt that Chango designed, that's going to look great on my chest. That sounded wrong,
really filthy,
but also accurate.
Yeah, no. And there are pictures on the internet with you with Chango's thing on your chest.
That's correct. Salacious content, Lisa.
See, nothing salacious happens off mic. We save it for y'all.
Yeah. I wonder if Tyler Crook, when he is inevitably listening to our introduction to his interview, will appreciate all of that.
If I did a super rad comic book couples counseling interview, I just 15-second skip through our rambling just to get to the goods.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have some goods this week. Tyler Crook, one of our all-time favorite artists. The first place I think we ever encountered his work was through BPRD. But since then, we've become huge fans of Harrow County. And he has a new comic book out from Dark Horse Comics called The Lonesome Hunters. The first issue is out right now. We've read the first 3 issues. And it is truly special.
It's a story about friendship and finding a kinship when there is profound loss.
Yeah. And it focuses on 2 protagonists. One is Howard. The first page, when you open it up, it says, 100 years ago, when Howard was a young man, he was given a magic sword. And, do you need to know any more after that introduction?
I feel like I would need more, because I'm like, well, is it a knight's sword? Is he getting on a steed? Because then I'm not interested.
I hear you, Lisa, but, it's clearly catnip for Brad. 1, I love an old man who is filled with regret. And 2, I love giant swords, which we've already established.
Stupid.
But I hear you, Lisa. You need a little bit more. So why don't you give what that other more is? What's the hook for you that drags you in?
For me, it's that it's an odd couple narrative, because partnered with Howard is Lupe, who is probably about 12 to 14 years old.
Yeah, preteen, early teen.
And she has lost both of her parents, and she's living in a tenuous situation with her uncle, and mystical, occult-related happenings bring them together, and they just, from right off the bat, they find this profound respect for each other, and they really do see themselves as peers and collaborators against the forces of darkness.
I think the first issue does such an exceptional job slowly easing you into the headspaces of both characters, following Howard as he is buying groceries before any of the magical stuff happens. We totally understand where he is in his emotional journey, and he's at a very low place. The comic is called The Lonesome Hunters. These 2 individuals are so isolated from the rest of the world, and they desperately need each other. And then magical shenanigans, evil magpies.
And of course, the art is gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's his signature watercolors and inks, I think, taken to the next level. It
Agreed.
is atmospheric. It is so expressive. You'll hear in this interview that he has been sitting on this story and stewing on this story for a very long time. And when you open this first issue, it feels like a lived-in idea.
Absolutely. And Tyler Crook, in this conversation, is so generous and honest with what was going on inside his head to bring the Lonesome Hunters out. And I do think it's worth noting, it's a rare flower comic, right? He is writing it. He is illustrating it. He is coloring it. He is lettering it. There are not too many comic books on the stands right now where that is the case. And I think if you are a fan of comics, you have to take notice when that happens. I think everybody should be picking up a copy of The Lonesome Hunters #1. And since we've read issues 2 and 3, we can tell you that it only gets better from this first issue.
Tyler was really good about not giving me the spoilers and not letting me say the spoilers. I felt lightly policed. But I love this story already so much.
Yeah. Lisa really dislikes talking about a comic when we can
I've only read the first, I'm only allowed to talk about the first issue.
Yeah.
Like a no spoiler conversation. It's a little bit of a sad trombone for me.
But I think we did a really good job surfing those waters. There's one moment where I'll probably have to edit something out
around
to keep
it.
those details away. But we've also already talked with Tyler about coming back on the show when the first 4 issues are completed and collected and having a deep dive, spoiler filled conversation. But what you're going to hear right now is like a tease to what that episode will be. That being said, like it's such an honest chat. And he is so open about what he was going through to bring this book about. I found this conversation to be incredibly moving, and it goes into places that I was not expecting, discussing the state of the industry and what it's like to be an illustrator in a writer-dominated medium. And we talk about that a little bit too. I don't want to spoil too much more about what you're about to hear, but we're really excited about it.
So without further ado, let's get into it.
Tyler, welcome to Comic Book Couples Counseling. Thank you for joining us in the Love Nest.
Hey, I'm super glad to be here.
Not as glad as we are. We won't let you have that gladness.
I don't know. I don't think you're as glad as I am. It's on. The gladness battle begins.
Tyler, we've read the first 3 issues of The Lonesome Hunters, but we're not going to be spoiling anything beyond the first issue, hopefully. But it is a comic that really speaks to Brad. I am a sucker for old man stories, especially old men who are defeated and filled with regret. Howard certainly fills that quota for me, but I'm wondering what exactly is the itch that you're scratching with The Lonesome Hunters?
Oh, geez. It's scratching a lot of different itches for me because it's like scratching story itches and like career itches at the same time. So, but I think story wise, man, it's like almost everything that I'm stressed about is like basically working its way into this comic pretty, across the board. So it's hard to really nail down one specific thing. I think really like a lot of it is just the terrible times we're living through in America right now, and like the just sort of that need for to have that human connection and to get the people that you love and make sure that they're safe and protected, and that the people you love are taking care of you. Like that's sort of been very heavily on my mind over the last couple of years, and I think that is probably a huge part of where I'm coming from with the Lonesome Hunters.
And the idea of finding human connectivity through art, but using 2 characters who seem so alone at the point of origin, or at least the start of this comic book. Lupe and Howard are extremely isolated, and I'm imagining that isolation is something that you have experienced, that we've all experienced quite a lot in the last few years, if not way longer than that.
Because they're 2 characters that are just like they're completely stuck. They're in some place where they don't want to be, and they just don't know how to get out of it. And I have definitely been in that spot multiple times in my life. Career wise and personally, and with all sorts of stuff where it's just like you just don't know how to get out. And I think that's what really got me initially thinking about having these 2 characters. Is like I think every time that I've been stuck like that, the way I've been able to get out of it is by someone I know being like, hey, let's try something. It hardly ever is me being like, oh, I know what I should try, with a few exceptions. And I think most, like for me, the stories that I always like the most are the stories that are about multiple people reacting to each other, and having that be the actual core of the story. Sort of regardless of what happens, the important thing is what these 2 people bring to each other to sort of get through the whatever your plot is. You know what I mean?
What I find so endearing about the relationship between Howard and Lupe is that even though their stories are so different, they recognize, I feel, a similar wanting, that similar like untethered sense of belonging in each other, and they kind of name it. One of the things I feel like they have in common is that sense of isolation within the context of like faith. So we have 2 like fairly mirroring scenes. The first scene where Howard is wielding the sword for the first time with his father
100 years ago.
100 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and his father is telling him, like, this is the right thing to do, these are the others, this is your job and purpose, and Howard just looks like scared and confused. And then we have Lupe in the bedroom at the foster home, where there is all of this signage of like faith, where worry ends where faith begins, and that kind of thing. And I have felt that similar thing of like lonesomeness within a faith. Like, is that something that you relate to?
Yeah. We were I was raised Mormon until well, we stopped going to church when I was a tween, basically, but I sort of considered myself Mormon until sometime in my teens. And like my experience with religion was always sort of um not really questioning, just sort of like going with the flow. And then there was a moment as a teenager where I suddenly essentially just lost my faith, and then there's a profound sense of loneliness associated with that. And I know my parents went through something very similar, but much earlier than I did, because they were the ones who obviously made the choice for us to stop going to church and stuff. And and I think that's something that I've seen in them a lot. And I've seen it through a lot of people who have basically lost their religious faith, where they really sort of long for the church that they thought that they had at one point. You know what I mean? So there's definitely a sense of that. There's also like my little I'm gonna get a little bit heavy with this. Sorry about this, everybody.
And
That's
this
okay.
is, what we do here.
But I lost my little sister died a couple years ago, and
I'm so sorry.
well, thanks. But she basically woke up one day and was feeling funny, and like a half hour later she couldn't speak anymore, and then by the time she got to the hospital, she was almost dead. Like she basically just had a brain aneurysm, mostly out of nowhere, and just died. Like when you feel a loss like that, there's something that is just really like when people try to tell you like, oh, she's gone to heaven or whatever, that is like always just feels so well, it feels lonely to me. Like it feels like it's like, because it feels false, but it just feels like there's a like that falseness is sort of it's it's like when you're like, if you have a stomach ache and someone like pats you on the hand and goes there, as if that's supposed to like fix your stomach ache, and it just makes you feel like nobody understands what you're going through, because they keep telling you this thing that doesn't make any sense and doesn't actually address the issue. If that I don't know if I'm kind of rambling,
No,
but
it
No.
makes total sense. It actually relates to something that happened between Lisa and I a week ago, given all the horrible stuff that's been happening in America. I tend to reach for optimism, and I was trying to deliver some of those kind of shallow, uh, hollow words of like, don't worry, it's all going to work out. We're all going to band together. And Lisa's like, shut the hell up. Like, I'm not here for you to dismiss my anger with some two-dimensional language.
I think it's like
Yeah.
that feeling of having like a one size fits all solution for every problem. Like some kind of platitude will resolve like your emotions for your sister, or resolve my disillusionment in humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's not. It's like every single person has to like interface with the world in their own way.
I think that stories do that for us. They give us something that serves the function, so we could therefore like experience an emotion.
Yeah, for sure. I think like one of the well, probably the greatest value of stories in general is just that make you not feel alone, like making giving you a world where there's characters that you feel like would like they would understand you as much as you might understand them.
So going back to those itches that you're scratching with the Lonesome Hunters, and using this kind of monster pagan invasion dressing onto the exploration of isolation. Why drape this particular frame on this itch?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think, well, I think that horror and magical realism both like sort of are wonderful genres in which to sort of explore human emotions in a way that you can't in other or you can't as easily in other genres. Uh, because you have like, especially when you have some magical realism elements, there is like there's a lot more metaphor that you can use.
Hmm.
And you can be a little bit more ham-fisted with it even and have it still read very well um, than you can if you were, say, doing like a romance or just a straight drama kind of a story.
Yeah, and Lisa and I have always discussed like the benefits of horror and fantasy and science fiction is that by embracing the extreme, it has a more authentic emotional truthness to it. Like
It's more evocative.
it's more evocative and more honest in a lot of ways, because like when you're going through something nightmarish, it is a horror film.
Yeah, yeah. That's I wish I could figure out where I had read this. I think it was somebody tweeted it on Twitter, and they said that the function of horror stories was to sort of model um surviving
Mm.
Hmm.
through trauma. And I've always thought that that was like right on the money for a lot of that. Yeah, because like the person makes it through the night in the haunted house, and they
Yeah.
against impossible odds they somehow managed to come through. And sometimes it doesn't feel like you can do that. So having stories that sort of show you how somebody did that, even if it's against something silly and made up, like that is definitely helpful, I think.
To me, The Lonesome Hunters is a story about belonging and bonding through collaboration and having a common purpose. And then this is the story you're like, and I'm doing this entirely on my own. I'm doing the colors and I'm doing the letters. Like, what about this particular like story cliff or where you're like, I gotta climb this on my own?
Well, I was hoping to start writing my own stuff um, when I first got into comics, I guess. Like that was sort of the goal. And I kept getting um, gigs where I was working with great writers, and it was really hard to say no to that. And sort of,
Mhm.
and then it was 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. I just sort of decided that I needed to stop putting it off. And I guess it was probably largely related to my sister dying, because I was like, oh, I have all these things that I want to do, and it turns out you can just die for no reason.
Mhm.
Like I have a limited time on Earth, and I have these things that I want to try, and I'm gonna try it. And in fact, I think that's probably why, like, the Lonesome Hunters is like something that I felt was a very personal story. Like, felt very. It's something that I feel very emotionally connected to, and feels like because I have tons of story. I have notebooks full of story ideas, and some of them are very silly, and some of them are very like plot oriented. And but this story in particular felt very much like if I only had the chance to make one story, this will be the one that I want to try to get off my chest right away.
There aren't too many creators out there doing the whole comic, and I know you
Hmm.
have editors and designers on the comic, but art, story, lettering, coloring, this is a Tyler Crook joint, and there aren't many people doing that right now. So like when I get something like this, it really does feel like something truly special. And I guess the question in there is like, does it feel as extraordinary to you that you're able to put like your entire being into this one story, and hopefully many more stories?
Um, it. I don't. Ugh, it kind of feels like it definitely feels special. I really try to put a lot of myself into every story I do.
Sure.
Um, So it doesn't feel unique. I mean, if anything, the sort of the feeling that manifests itself from being the sole person on this is basically stress, I think.
Hmm.
Like I don't think I've ever been more like stressed out than in the last, at least like career wise. And the 2 weeks leading up to the release of this first issue, I was just like, I put my whole heart and soul into this book. It's only me. If nobody likes it, then it means nobody likes me.
Hmm.
Oh.
You know, like, but when I work with a writer, I can always be like, the writer didn't quite do the thing, or like, there's always like a little bit of like mental cushioning that I can prepare for myself,
Hmm.
But yeah, when it's all you, it's a lot of responsibility, it feels like.
Well, sure. And, creating the thing is one thing, and then selling the thing is another, and promoting the thing is another, coming onto podcasts and whatnot, talking about this thing that is so intimate to you, but having to, like, beat the grass and make sure you can get as many snakes on the comic as possible. Is that how the phrase goes? Many
Yeah,
eyes.
exactly. Yeah, it's an industry term.
Yeah. And so the stress is absolutely understandable. But is it something that uh, you enjoy putting yourself through and are excited to do on the next round? Or does it feel like, we're only one issue out of Lonesome Hunters, but like when Lonesome Hunters comes out, gets a trade collection, are you ready to do this whole process all over again?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Like, like I don't think, I mean, I think as a comic book creator, one of my favorite things to do is complain. But it's so fulfilling, like doing, I mean, just the fact that have like finished issues and turned them in is like, it's impossible. No one can do that, but there they are. I don't know how it happened. And that sort of stuff is very, I don't know, it's just fulfilling. It feels good.
Yeah, I mean, and then the idea that, like, okay, Tyler has finished issue 3, right? Like, it doesn't have to go to anywhere else. Like, Tyler has finished it. Like, it doesn't go to a letter, it doesn't go to
Yeah.
a colorist. It's kind of incredible that it just comes from your desk to the stands, basically.
Yeah, and I'm, to make it even worse, is I'm doing the watercolor
Yeah.
techniques, and so that's all like, it's like my hand is on every single, it's visible in every single mark and every single word choice and everything.
There's a line that sticks out to me. I'm not going to quote it verbatim because I didn't write it down verbatim, but like Lupe saying, like, there are all of the little thoughtless decisions we make. In her case, she's saying, like, that kind of exploded my life. I made a thoughtless decision and now my entire future is different. But like, to me, I go like, well, even our big decisions, like you doing your own comic where you touch every single panel, is the culmination of a bunch of decisions you've made. Do you feel like if you were to trace the decisions toward what has made this comic book take place, do you feel those tiny decisions that pushed you towards making comics?
Oh yeah, like it's like for example, like my watercolor technique, that came because I got a job. It was a work for hire gig doing a book called Bad Blood, and they wanted me to color it also, and I didn't want to sit in front of a computer, so I was like, oh, can I do this watercolor thing? And they're like, sure, we don't care, do it. And well, they weren't quite like that, but but they decided it was okay. And that was like, in my mind, when I made that choice, that was just like, for this project, one and done, then I will never color another thing again. But then the next thing I did, they were like, we want you to do the watercolor thing. And I'm like, am I the watercolor guy now? Like I didn't know going in that was going to be me now, but I love it. It's worked out really nice for me, but it was sort of one of those things where it was like, yeah, I hadn't necessarily made that calculation that was going to be where I wanted to take my artwork, going forward. But yeah, I'm grateful it did. And I think that's like, Yeah, I don't know. Like when you're trying to navigate a career like comics, it's always about so much of it is just about meeting people too. So there's so many like just like the time you're sitting at the bar at the convention and you turn to someone and you're like, "Hey, how's it going?" And 5 years later it turns into work for you.
Hmm.
And those sorts of small decisions that get made all along the way are kind of extraordinary.
On the watercolor front, though, I saw you tweeting a little while ago about contemplating sticking with acrylics to
Oh,
color.
yeah, well, acrylic ink
Yeah,
specifically.
yeah, acrylic ink, yeah.
Because I can actually get that to look a lot like watercolor, but it's really hard to work with it as far as like mixing colors and like keeping it on your palette and stuff. Because when it dries, it's like it's done. But watercolor, you can always like when it dries on your palette, you just wet your brush and wiggle it in there, and it comes back to life. Um, which is great for like mixing colors and managing colors, but when you actually put it on the page it can kind of suck, because then when you put more paint on top of watercolor paint it just reactivates the paint underneath it. So when you do it with ink you can sort of like layer and layer and layer and build things up and get very subtle color changes that you couldn't necessarily get with watercolor. But I don't know, I'm working with like a combo between the two where I sort of bounce back and forth. I kind of start with acrylic ink and then I do a lot of watercolor and then I finish it with acrylic ink. And that's been working really well and serving me very well.
And what I find so interesting about the whole process is how it seemingly stems from this idea of, well, I don't want to look at a computer screen. I want to keep it a tactile experience.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a part of it. It's like there's something about looking at a computer screen that just makes me so tired by the end of the day. I can do like 8 hours in front of the computer, but I could do 16 hours in front of a piece of paper and come away at the end of the day feeling about the same. Yeah, well, and also it's nice to have original artwork to sell. That's a huge, it's a huge benefit.
Well, as you know, comic readers, comic collectors, I think that comic folk tend to be, and maybe this is a generational thing, but I think they tend to place a lot of value on the object.
Hmm.
We were actually talking about this just a little while ago. But the comic itself is a totem. The art is a totem. The tools are totems.
Yeah, it's something I really wish, especially like in the trade paperbacks. I really wish we could spend a lot more, like do a lot more wild stuff with the book designs.
Mm.
But everyone sort of wants that standardized size and binding and stuff. But yeah, I miss the days like in the '90s when everyone was doing like foil covers and stuff. I,
Yeah.
I honestly think we should bring that back. Maybe not do variants covers like that, but just do like the A cover is make it embossed. Like go nuts, man. Let's make these books beautiful.
Yeah, well, we have to like make them worth having in the long box or having on the shelf.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, and I get probably my designer Patrick, like I'm probably making him a little bit miserable because it's just like I always want like one of the first conversations I have with anytime I work with a designer is I'm just like, is there something you wanted to do that no one will ever let you do? Because let's talk about doing that thing. Because
Mm-hmm.
but everyone is always just like, no, whatever you want, Tyler. Like, no, let's go nuts. Let's make it something weird.
Well, so let's talk about that from your perspective, though. This idea that, okay, I'm starting out on the Lonesome Hunters. I want to do something I've never done before. It feels like, as a fan of your work, that you are doing that. And this is going to be a 4-issue series, which seems like impossibly short to us.
Hmm.
With the world you've created.
With the world you've created, absolutely. Are the ideas that you're looking at next, that you're percolating on, are they related to what you're exploring in the Hunters, whether that is narratively, character wise, or just emotionally?
Well, what I'm really hoping for is that this first story arc will sell well enough that I can sort of get approval for another. Um, like it seems like most of the people I've talked to have only want to do miniseries, so I'm
Mhm.
hoping I can do the Lonesome Hunters as a series of miniseries, and
Hmm.
because I definitely have a much larger story in mind, because in the first 4 issues we aren't going to be able to learn every mystery about the sword or
Yeah.
everything about Howard's childhood and Lupe's childhood. Like we just can't get into all of that in the 4 issues. So I'm hoping that there'll be time to actually explore that and yeah, I have like big plans, but it all sort of boils down to if we can get these first 4 issues to sell well enough to keep it going. Yeah.
What do you see the 4 issues accomplishing? Like, is it just a hook or?
Yeah, I guess in some ways it's the hook. It's like it's it's basically the story of how Howard and Lupe met. Like that's what this first story arc is all about. It's like how they met and like sort of why they ended up being where they end up being, without spoiling everything.
I love the contrast of the magpies. The idea of like Howard and Lupe are looking for belonging with people, while the magpies are all about like objects, and how it's the desire to be with objects that is creating this chaos.
That's really interesting. I actually had not thought about that. The the magpies are, and that I think that tracks, but it probably wasn't intentional. The magpie thing, I have not, in a couple interviews, people have asked me where the magpies came from, and I cannot remember for the life of me like what inspired me to go with magpies. It's just sort of always been magpies, and I don't even really have a connection to magpies. Like I don't. When I was a little kid, we lived in Idaho where there were some magpies, but I've never been around magpies, so I don't know exactly why the magpies came out. Just I thought that they were cool in the way they collected objects, but also I have since found out that that's not actually true, that they don't collect shiny things any more than any other bird might collect shiny things, but nevertheless it made a good story. And
For the function of the story, they collect
yeah,
objects.
and I love anthropomorphizing animals, and sort of I love I have a real love of reading Native American folk tales and sort of religious stories, and there are so many just amazing stories about animals turning into people and doing things and then turning back into animals, and that sort of stuff has always really appealed to me. So I like having those magpies, and I like and I also love like trying to get animals to act in my books. Whenever I have an animal that I can sort of try to get them to emote, that's always really, really fun for me. And birds are especially hard. Well, I guess, maybe my connection to birds is we have chickens now, and I'm absolutely in love with them. So I spend a lot of time with birds in that respect. But I think any magpie would be upset if I compared them to a chicken.
I've read elsewhere that the idea of this story like started 10 years ago and clearly has been evolving and is still evolving from that inception point of the idea. Like what was going on 10 years ago that inspired this particular story?
Well, I remember the very initial thing that got me going on this was an ad I saw for Amnesty International. And it was and you can, I think if you Google this, you can find it pretty easy, but it was the photo of I'm spacing on the dude's name, Captain Picard.
I said Jean-Luc. Patrick Stewart.
Yeah. So it's a photo of Patrick Stewart, and he's like wearing a leather jacket, and he's holding a sign that says like "Stop Violence Against Women," but he's holding like a little shopping bag in his other hand, and looking very stern at the camera. And it was one of those. I don't know where I saw that image, but it like just struck me, and it was like, what is this? And so a huge amount of the story initially, I think, was inspired by me trying to solve be like, well, okay, what if this was like, what would explain a guy like this? An old man going shopping. And in fact, that's, the first scene in the book is Howard going to the bodega and doing a little bit of grocery shopping. And that's like straight up from just seeing that ad. And I sent out a one of the pages in my newsletter just the other day, because I started actually drawing this book back then, and I've since redrawn the whole thing. But I only drew like 3 or 4 pages, and it was because we had just moved to Oregon, and I had like a week off before I needed to start on other projects, and I was like, well, I'll just start on this thing for just to keep my hands moving, and it was something that I was kind of excited about at the time. So that's what really got me started on it 10 years ago, was seeing that photo and then having some free time and being like, and knowing, of course, that I wanted to write and draw my own book eventually. So I was like, I might as well get started on it. But it just took forever to get to a point where I could do it.
I love that scene with Howard in the bodega, where this the clerk is trying to like make kind of a shallow human connection about like like a woman slipped in her bathtub, the preciousness of life, and Howard just dismisses it out of hand, like, you know what, that sounds great, I wish that was me. And then the clerk, to Howard's cry of desperation and loneliness, is like, ha 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 ha, like,
good one,
like,
buddy.
well, yeah, like, I mean, that might be one of the loneliest
so honest
loneliest scenes in the book, because it's essentially one guy going like look at how thoughtful I am, and the other guy going like, look how detached and sad I am, and then they both just part.
Yeah. I guess that's my only worry with the book, is maybe I'm a little bit heavy-handed with some of this stuff.
No,
I love it.
I feel like maybe like Alan Moore was like not known for his subtlety either, so maybe I'm okay.
I think subtlety is overrated.
Yeah, at least that's a catchphrase of Lisa's. Subtlety is overrated.
Well,
you go.
It's just one of the things that one of my favorite sort of ways of doing like structuring a story ever is and this is actually the title, The Lonesome Hunters, is actually swiped from my favorite novel, which is The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. And that book is like, that's one of those books that I read like every other year probably, and it's just like, it's one of those books that's about one thing, and and it's actually about loneliness, and it's, at least in the way I have interpreted the book, it's like, it's this book about loneliness, and it has about 8 main characters, and each one of them is lonely in their own very unique way, and it's just an exploration of that. And I love that in a story. Like, I love when it's like, because I think a lot of times people confuse depth with complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, like, if you have something simple and just go all the way, if you just take one idea and explore it from every kind of angle you can, as opposed to having a story that explores 50 different ideas. Like, I always think that resonates a lot more with me. So I feel like sometimes, like I said, I'm worried it's a little heavy-handed, but I feel like every scene is sort of like designed to come back to very small set of ideas that I'm trying to explore.
I feel like lonesomeness is like such a it's a hard emotion to talk about, because sometimes when you have it, you don't recognize it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like over the pandemic, I start, like, because I'm extremely introverted, so I feel like over the pandemic, I felt loneliness, perhaps for the first time. And I was just like, why am I just so crabby? I'm crabby and I'm uncomfortable in my skin. And, everything my beloved Brad says is annoying to me. Like, what is wrong with me? And then I talked to my friend Lindsay on the phone, and I was like, oh, and like that filled my cup. And I was like, oh, I was like lonesome. Like, it's hard to recognize.
And don't you think that lonesomeness is like at the center of so much agony right now?
Oh, for sure. And I think American culture in particular seems so designed for lonesomeness. I mean, that's why everyone goes on Twitter and like is like desperately trying to find some sort of connection,
Mm-hmm.
And it's there's just so much that is designed to not to keep us sort of like from actually speaking to one another, and it's freaky sometimes.
In the first issue, there's the scene with the teenagers on the stoop, who they're their sense of feeling of belonging with each other is to alienate other people as they're walking down the street. And I feel like sometimes
That's America.
that's what Twitter feels like.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably a good read. Like, yeah, and even those guys, you know, they insult each other in the process too. Like, they're not like their group dynamic is very fragile at the same time.
Lisa and I were talking before you came on about one of the brilliant touches that you bring to a very long life, like a supernaturally propelled long life with Howard, is that he is old, but he's also still aging. He still has tummy aches. He still needs
He's
Tums.
uncomfortable. You know, he's eating saltines. Like the pleasures of life are now behind him.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things I was having a conversation with someone about this just the other day. Like, I feel like the moment you become an adult is however old you are. It's the moment when you actually realize that this is exactly what adults feel like. You know, it's like that you're not when you're like filled with some like insightful knowledge about the world or like true understanding of the nature of being. It's sort of like oh, it's just gonna always be like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like that's when you become an adult, is when you sort of realize that you will never know what you're doing. And that's like, and that's so much of what Howard is about, is like not knowing what he's doing. And in fact, I think part of why he and Lupe make such a connection is that like in a lot of ways Howard is completely frozen in his teenage self. That was you know, that moment of trauma when he was a teenager basically locked part of him down, you know, and has not been able to grow beyond it. And so when he meets Lupe, who's a teenager experiencing trauma her own self, like they see that in each other. And that's the, I mean, and it's very easy for a grown man who has not matured beyond a certain point to be super creepy. And I'm trying so hard to make Howard actually not seem like a total creepo.
You have a moment later on in the comic, which I will not spoil, but it is a moment of connectivity between them in a car ride. And I was so surprised and delighted by it, because it's not my experience talking with my elders about the things I like. And the fact that Howard still has that joyful, youthful curiosity for what is happening today, and he's not just trapped in, you know, the childhood history that he experienced.
Yeah, I think that's I'm very excited for people to actually read that scene. Like that scene for me is what it was like starting in comics, because like my first comic came out when I was 35, and so the people that I was hanging out with were almost who like were having, you know, the people I was coming up with at the time who had their same first comic coming out about that same time, and we were meeting and hanging out. You know, they were all like 10 years younger than me. And so I missed a lot. Like there's a large cultural divide between like what my media interests are and what people 10 years younger than me are. And so every time we would, you know, sit down and be having dinner or something, they would be telling me about like some obscure anime that I'd never heard of. And I'm just like, what is this story? What are you talking about? And so yeah, anyway, I'm excited for people to see that.
Well, I mean, that is, you know, we're gearing up to go to San Diego Comic-Con, having not gone to one in 3 years. And my experience going to that convention and really embracing the strangers around you and exploring what they're excited about, like one of the most famous panels that Lisa and I have attended in our own geek history is this Steven Universe panel. We do nothing about Steven Universe, but witnessing these folks just be overcome with emotion based on what they were seeing about the upcoming Steven Universe movie really piqued our curiosity. And we went and we watched some Steven Universe afterwards, and we were like, no,
doesn't connect with us.
Doesn't connect with us. But we loved that it connected with them. And I think that idea of like getting excited about what other people excited about, like being geeks for passion, is very much a part of being a comic book reader. But you
Hmm.
sometimes forget that when you isolate yourself in your own shop. Like your shop has an aesthetic and you only stick to that aesthetic.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's I've been volunteering down at my local library and spending a lot of time with teenagers down there, and the stuff that they are into is wild to me. It is complete like they're very into what's it called? Is it called real play? It's like people will play like the
You
role
tell
play
us.
games. Like they'll do a podcast where they, record them playing D&D or whatever.
Hmm.
Um and then there's also like uh the scene. I don't even know if I fully understand it. It is something where people will put on little shows, but it's all recorded in Minecraft.
Yes.
So they have like these intricate dramas that they've and just huge productions that they put together, and it's all happens inside of Minecraft. But it's like it is so fun to like hang out with these kids and have them show me their fan art of these things where I'm like, what even is this that you have drawn me? What are you showing me? But yeah, no, like that, but that enthusiasm is really great. And that's so much of like just to speak about comic conventions, like one of the things that is so remarkable in like geek spaces is how you can like I said earlier, like I'll be at the comic book convention bar and turn around to somebody and be like, hey, how's it going? And like that everyone there you have something in common with, and it's
Yep.
that you love um this particular mode of storytelling, and like that is so awesome.
Yeah, it's a truly special experience that I have missed for a very long time, and it's nice to be falling back into these shows as as we adjust to the way of things. I was going to say
Yeah,
as things
yeah.
get better, but I like as we
As
get
we
used to it.
acclimate.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm nervous, man. I'm still not quite ready to do any conventions yet.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
doing
that's
some
understandable.
shop signings, but those are always like a lot fewer people.
I went out and I covered Star Wars Celebration a couple weeks ago in California, and I was super nervous going into it.
Did you fly all the
But
way out to California?
yeah, I
Oh,
flew out to California, and I came back, and no issues for Brad, at least.
knock on the
Although
wood.
all the, all the press guys I was sitting with all got COVID.
Yeah.
So
Oh man, I got
yeah,
like the last convention I did was February 2020,
yeah,
and I got home and it was like one of those things. It's like we went there and then was like checking the news on my phone, and they're like, like a week later, stuff went into lockdown. So like when I got home, like people that I had been tabling with actually had COVID by the time they got home.
yeah,
And
yeah.
We were at Sundance. We were at
oh wow,
Sundance,
In
and as
2020.
we were at the first super spreader event, and as we were like, we hadn't checked the news in days because we were at a film festival,
hmm
and as we're driving to the airport, I go like, Brad, there is a pandemic in Wuhan, and they're saying that we shouldn't be going to airports. And he's like, well, do you want to live in Utah? And I was like, I do not. But I just I just remember like, just being in the airport and looking around.
Like every screen was talking about
oh
it.
Yeah,
yeah,
it was just absolutely wild. And and we were just about to do a whole list of things that I don't know, like we didn't even know about masking yet. We were just like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
it was weird.
Keep your breath shallow.
For the next two
uh,
years, yeah,
yeah, yeah. But
yeah. So I
like
don't
I
know.
said, I flew out there. I survived.
He's
We're gonna do it again.
we've both been playing with fire, and neither of us have gotten COVID yet. We're very lucky, knocking
Yeah,
on wood.
yeah. I'm still worried about it. I don't know. We'll see. I'm hoping next year I'll feel okay doing that again, because I miss it, man. I miss like everything.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
sure. But I think it's a choice that every individual needs to make and get comfortable with. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
at your own schedule, a
Mhm.
okay. Tyler, before we wrap up,
I forgot we were recording,
We were
a,
recording
podcast.
before we wrap up, I just wanted to like revisit talking again about the itches you were scratching with the Lonesome Hunters, and
Mm.
talking about the creative itches that you're wanting to do. And is that in reference to like you are putting out your book? This is you, or was there anything else to that idea as well?
Well, I think it's like I've been in the industry long enough, and it's such a hard thing to talk. This is it's the the thing that was on my mind a lot when I decided it was time to go was that the writers get a much better deal than artists in the industry,
Which
and
is insane, but
which is
yes.
yeah, it's wild, and it's not. I want to be very careful that everyone understand that the writers that I have worked with to a person have been amazing and have been so supportive and so great, but it's not up to them. There's an industry thing, like for example, like on my books are listed on Amazon, but because I'm the writer, you can't you can't search for me as easily. Like when you want to see like, oh, I want to pick up a bunch of Tyler's books that he's drawn, it's like you have to like know that Cullen Bunn wrote it, or that Jeff Lemire wrote it, and look for it that way. And it's like everything is sort of set up assuming that comic books are the same as like a novel, and it's not. And so like I really was sort of feeling that ceiling of like, well, I'm not going to be able to go much further in my career if I'm just going to be drawing for working with writers. If I start writing my own stuff, then I will have a little bit more control over where I go, and the industry infrastructure will be there to support me as I try to go there. So, and that was a huge part of it.
I wonder if that conversation is opening up again, because I feel like I've read a few articles lately about how the comic industry became a writer's medium. I can't remember, it was like Inverse or somebody put that article out.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the audience is at least being fed a few more think pieces about how comics are a visual medium, and we cannot forget that. Like
Yeah,
the writer is the artist.
yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that a lot of people don't understand how much writing is done by an artist
Yeah,
every time. There's a great book by Tomorrow's. Oh no, but I can't remember what it's called.
I love that publisher.
Yeah, no, they do some amazing books. But they basically there's a book that they did where they had somebody would write a 3-page story, and then they would have 3 artists draw it. And when you look at a book, like when you look at a story like that that's presented 3 times from 3 different artists, you can really see like, oh, I see how much the artist brings to this, because they were they're completely different stories. They're not even like you couldn't even say like who wrote it based on looking at the 3 different art styles and the way they've arranged shots and the way they stage things and the way they work on the acting and stuff is all so unique to the artist that that it's it's a 50-50 writing proposition at that point.
Yeah, I love to give people, and I can't remember what the GI Joe issue number is, but there's a GI Joe issue from Marvel Comics where Michael Golden illustrated Larry Hama's script after Todd McFarlane, a very young Todd McFarlane, messed it up. And Larry Hama didn't like Todd McFarlane's version. So they redid it with Michael Golden. They published the Michael Golden one. And then when McFarlane blew up with Spawn and the Spider-Man comics and all that stuff, they then published the original take as like a special edition. And so you could look at what Michael Golden's version of that script looks like versus Todd McFarlane's, and they are night and day.
I'm going to look that up. I did not know that
I will, after this conversation, I will look up the number of what that issue is, and I'll include it in the show notes of this episode, and I'll also email it to you.
Yeah, that's got to be amazing, because like I can't even imagine those two telling
Yeah.
anything remotely similar as far as how they put that story together, even not knowing what the story is.
And it is a very young Todd McFarlane, so it's not even like Todd McFarlane at like the heights of his powers by any means, but you can still see McFarlane in there. And again, it's like a good storytelling lesson.
Yeah.
Well, Tyler, this has been incredible. Thank you for hanging out as long as you have with us. It's a true pleasure. We love the Lonesome Hunters. We're dying for that 4th issue, and we will be craving more. So we need everyone to be buying Lonesome Hunter issues on the rack. And when the trade paperback comes out, pick up the trade paperback, because I need this series in its many, many series iterations.
Thank you so much. I need it too. Please, please, everyone, buy my book.
Tyler, in case people don't look at those show notes and they want to continue this conversation with you, where can they find you online?
I am on Twitter. I am Mr. Tyler Crook, MrTylerCrook. And on Instagram, I'm also Mr. Tyler Crook, but you have to spell out Mr. Yeah, and that's the 2 main ways to get a hold of me. And if you want to ever send me a note, you can go to mrcrook.com.
And my buddy Eric would be upset with me if I didn't say thank you from him to you. He runs 4 Color Fantasies.
Oh.
And you did a charity auction, or you helped in their Winchester Literacy charity auction some time back during the lockdown days.
Yeah, those guys are amazing with that. It's such a great program that they do. And I think everyone listening should pay attention to that, because you could buy some very good artwork at a very reasonable price to help a very good cause.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Like the original art that we've been able to get, not your piece, mind you.
Yeah, we
were outbid.
it.
We were outbid on the Tyler Crook piece, but we did get a really nice Jeff Lemire.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
All right, Tyler, we're going to let you go now for real this time.
All right. It was so nice to meet you guys. And, I told you beforehand, but I'm going to say it again. I love your show. I think that you guys do such a good job of analyzing comics in such an empathetic way. It means it's always fun to listen to. It means a lot.
Oh,
Tyler, that means the world to us. Thank you. Incredible. Well, that's going to do it. I'm now saying goodbye. This is goodbye.
what if he has more compliments? I want the recording running. No, I'm joking.
No more compliments.
Okay, that sounds right.
From now on, Lisa, I want every Creator Corner to end with the person we're interviewing telling us we're awesome.
I think that's how every conversation just in life should begin.
I agree.
And I think you're great. You think I'm great. Let's have a conversation. We're still good. Okay, then you part. Everybody feels super chuffed.
But I hope everyone listening really enjoyed that conversation. And I hope everyone is already planning their next trip to the comic book store to pick up the Lonesome Hunters #1, because we need these 4 issues to sell well, because Lisa needs at least, 50 issues, 60 issues?
To read the first 3 issues, forgetting conveniently that there is one more issue, it feels impossible.
Right,
for me to be, not that I won't be satisfied and it won't be a beautiful story, but there's no way I'm not going to want any more.
I am desperate to read the 4th issue, but I also know that when I conclude that 4th issue, it will absolutely leave me wanting more. And that's a good thing, but I now need that more.
Right.
I also think it's kind of hilarious that we started this episode, you and I, discussing our excitement around heading to the San Diego Comic-Con. And when we bring it up with Tyler, Tyler's like, pump your brakes, I'm not ready.
Oh, yeah. I do wonder if, for those of you who have experienced this pandemic, who have already been working from home,
right,
and you had the option of working entirely from home, that it's almost a little harder to reacclimate to our new normal, which is not great.
Yeah.
But we are a little bit more comfortable with traveling. We are more comfortable with going to the comic book store and things like that, because my work requires me to be out of the home, whether I liked it or not.
Right.
And
you had to pull that Band-Aid off really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about my mom, right? She is still really locked down at home. And I feel like my mom was really waiting for something like the pandemic to isolate her. She loves her isolation. And now the idea of getting mom out of isolation, I'm just going to throw my hands up to that.
Yeah. Well, I think with some margaritas and some kind of outdoor patio situation, I think we'll get her out again.
We're working on it. But the point is, and what we talked with Tyler about, is like you have to come to that feeling on your own. So if you are not feeling like, let's get in a mass of 300,000 people at San Diego Comic-Con, we can't blame you.
But at the same time, it might very well be a mistake.
Right.
You know, we do not know the right thing to do.
Yeah.
This is our, you've heard me say it before, I'll say it again. This is our first global pandemic. We're doing the best that we can.
Yep.
Happy Comic-Con.
Happy Comic-Con. I'm still excited about it. And super excited for the Lonesome Hunters. #1, on the stands. Go grab a copy. Put it in your subscription box. Make sure that you have issues 2, 3, and 4 on order already. Let's show Dark Horse Comics that we are super stoked for this book.
I have the floppy in front of me. I read it on PDF.
Yep.
Which was fine, but like the physical copy is just so much more beautiful. It's the way it's meant to be read. And I'm just looking at this cover and I just keep getting lost in Howard's old man hands.
Yes.
Like look at his
yes.
his like lumpy, bumpy,
gnarly hands.
Oh, it's so good.
So good. Like you said, Lisa, I do feel like Tyler Crook has kicked it up a notch or two with the Lonesome Hunters. He is one of our favorite artists.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Harrow County is another book that you should all be reading. You should go check out his old BPRD comics. You should check out Bad Blood. But the Lonesome Hunters, like this feels, you know, like a magnum opus in progress.
I mean, as an introvert, like I can see the advantages of not having to collaborate. Like that feeling of doing things like I can do this the way I want. I mean, he has editors and publishers and stuff.
Sure.
But like I don't have to ask for permission. I don't have to negotiate for space. I can do this the way I see it on my first try. And I love that for him.
And also, as he mentioned, this idea, like, if I want to, like, make my mark in this world, my name needs to come up on Amazon, right?
Yeah. Like that was some realness.
That's some realness right there. And we should also state, like, towards the end of that conversation, we were referencing some comic books and some books. I have that information before me now. Let me get it real quick.
Oh, we almost forgot.
So the book that Tyler Crook was talking about is called Working Methods by John Lowe. It's out of print, but you can still get a PDF, and Tyler sent me a link. I'll include the link to that in the show notes. And the G.I. Joe comic I was discussing was G.I. Joe number 60, but I was wrong about the replacement artist. It wasn't Michael Golden replacing Todd McFarlane. It was Danny Bulanadi doing finishes on Marshall Rogers' breakdowns. And the Todd McFarlane art was republished in what they called G.I. Joe Special Number 1 back in like 1995. And Comic Book Resources did an article on those two issues, and I'll include a link in the show notes so you can take a look at that.
You got something wrong? Oh my God!
Yes, Lisa, it is possible. It's never happened before.
Everyone should just do like me, avoid all proper nouns, make no references to everything, just float down, just that even tide of just never committing to anything.
I'm just glad we corrected it on the outro before people were tweeting at us about it.
I don't know. I mean, those tweeters, they can be quick.
They can be. But that is going to do it for us this week. Thank you, Tyler Crook.
This was the best. He was so fun. I can't wait to have him back.
Yes, absolutely. And while we're talking links, I'll also include a link to Chango's TeePublic shop. So
you can have Chango's thing on your chest.
Yes.
We should all be so lucky.
That is true. And on our next episode, we'll be continuing our session with Angela and Sarah discussing the comic book series 1602, Witchfinder Angela. It's our second episode in that session series. The last episode, link in the show notes, was to Angela, Asgard's assassin. Really had a great time with that conversation. Very excited about this series that we're doing. And yes, we're building up to going to San Diego Comic-Con. We're going to have many more guests on the show this week around that convention circuit. You wouldn't believe the publishers and artists and writers that we have been talking to. I'm very excited, but I don't want to overpromise too much. Matt Kent is definitely going to be on the show.
Because that conversation's already in the can.
That's right. And it was also a really great conversation talking about his new imprint at Dark Horse Comics, Flux House. We get into the nitty-gritty of the format wars.
Oh my, Brad, look at my stolen pocket watch. It is time for us to wrap up this episode. Where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on all social medias at MouthDork. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, you can send them to Aaron Prescott at A Cool Hand Fluke. And if you have some words of affirmation for our radical banner art and show poster, send them to Karen Charm at Karen_X-Men fan. Lisa, where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
I am always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Google, and Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes. We actually have a spoiler-free Sad Trombone review of Thor: Love and Thunder coming out. We've already seen it.
It's really good.
Hey, that a spoiler?
No, I like the new Thor movie. We don't know what Lisa thinks of it.
But we'll be answering our Patreon followers' questions about it.
And
so
yeah.
you're going to want to get in on that if you're not already in on our Sleeping with Sandman. Sleepwalking with Sandman episodes.
I would also like to do Sleeping with Sandman episodes.
Ooh.
Very kinky.
For what, OnlyFans? Is that what it's called?
Yes, OnlyFans. If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on Instagram and Twitter at CBCC Podcast.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and if you'd like to do an active service, why not write a review of the show while you're there? We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open. Did I say that weird?
Doopy doopy. Bum bum ba da bum bum ba da ba.
No more compliments.
Okay, that sounds right.